Hey guys! In this guide I will give you a quick overview of the fighter and ranger playstyle, their build options and abilities. Let's quickly go over the weapon and combat basics before we look into attributes and talent choices. Your weapons allow you to perform normal attacks or power attacks. If you have a shield or a two-handed weapon, you can block by holding the right mouse button. Only shields can block projectiles and spells. All damage you block will hit your endurance bar and not your health bar. Dual-wielded weapons can't block or parry. If you are dual-wielding melee weapons, you can spam left and right mouse button rapidly at the same time to alternate between hands while recovering from the other hand's animation. This way you will have a higher attack speed than with a single weapon. When dual-wielding pistols, hold both mouse buttons at the same time for a synchronized power attack. Because of the long reload time of guns in general, even if dual-wielding, it's not recommended to use them outside of power attacks. Both don't have the reload problem of guns, but still perform better using power attacks over normal attacks. If you hold the right mouse button with a bow or gun, a circle appears to show you where the weak point of the enemy is. Weak point hits do critical damage. Power attacks when using melee have a gap closer built in at the end of the animation, allowing for more mobility. They cost double the endurance of the tooltip to perform, break blocks and are better to initialize engagements, and are safer to use in general. The gap closer allows you to stay away from the enemy while doing most of the animation. In addition to that, depending on your weapon choice, they even have a higher stagger amount, often leading to a couple of frames where the enemy can't react to your follow-up. Normal attacks leave you more open to counter-attacks, but they will deal more damage when spammed. Dual-wielded melee can't perform their power attacks simultaneously like pistols do. Alternating between power attacks for both hands doesn't lead to the same amount of action time reduction like with normal attacks, since only a small part of the power attack animation can be cut off by performing the attack with the other hand. Therefore, dual-wielded melee weapons work better when spamming normal attacks. Now I will give you a short rundown over each attribute and its meaning for fighters and ranger builds. And then, after going over some basic passive talents, we will discuss how these stats influence your attribute and item stat priorities. Might. This is the easiest stat to recommend to any build. There are some mathematical reasons why other stats might be more useful. We cover that later. Constitution. More HP is good, but every point you invest here takes away from the damage you can do. The max HP % increase doesn't only enhance your base health, but also bonuses on equipment. Basically, the more you have from equipment, the stronger the stat will scale. As a rule of thumb, you should not invest more as you need to stay alive. The smaller your HP pool while being able to stay alive, the easier the combat gets, because you do more damage and the enemies get less chances to kill you. But if you are so low that they can almost one-shot you, then you should invest. Find your personal middle ground. Intellect. High essence values are not needed for a fighter or hunter. Use foot and blood magic to cast abilities when needed. Most of your damage should come from weapon attacks. Resolve. This increases your maximum endurance, but it does not increase your endurance recovery. Where it actually does count is optimizing your engagement times. When you are going in for a kill, and after initiating with a heavy attack and then doing 3 quick swings, you are already empty. Having a longer bar can mean the difference between getting the kill and being able to dodge out of the infight or not. But you can also have a too long bar, where you just don't need the excessive amount of endurance, compared to the damage increases that you could have invested in. You can undercap your endurance for a last action, which will be free of cost if you are under 0. This will let your endurance bar blink for a second where you can't do any actions. You can exploit this mechanic with very endurance heavy actions like the heavy attack of a two-handed hammer, which if timed right can grant you 40 points of free endurance. If you are going to utilize this regularly, it's better to not have a long bar. Only invest in Resolve if you feel that your endurance bar is too small for a basic action sequence. But in most cases, your basic bar should be fine if you don't dodge around like a maniac. The second wind buff is not needed. Its cooldown is too long. Even if you max it out, it won't proc twice in a normal fight, and you can always drink a health potion. Dexterity. This is a more complicated stat to evaluate. On paper, a 34% attack speed increase would work as a multiplicative increase for your damage done, and therefore would be more useful to invest in than might. But all actions you do as a physical attacker cost endurance, and the amount of attacks per time frame you can actually do is not ultimately limited by your action speed but by your endurance recovery. And because your endurance recovery is not influenced by dexterity, increasing action speed might, depending on your choice of weapon, not result in an as high damage increase as you would expect. As a rule of thumb, if your weapon attack animation, for example the reload frames of an arquebus, is so long that you recover so much endurance that it doesn't rapidly deplete your endurance bar, it's safe to invest in dexterity over might. But if your attack cycle makes your endurance bar deplete very quickly, it is better to go for another stat. Perception. This stat has two components, a crit increase and a range increase. The range increase is very often not that useful. Every ranged weapon has a maximum range. And if you attack while standing outside that range, you do increasingly less damage, until your damage doesn't even hit the enemy anymore. A perception stat of 15 increases that range by 50%, and therefore the damage you do if you are outside the maximum range. Most of the battle with ranged weapons will take place inside the maximum range, at least if you are not completely dedicating to a sniper build and playstyle. But at the same time, if you are outside that maximum range and profit from increased range, that also means you have invested less points into other damage increasing stats, which will make the damage difference less significant while being purely conditional. Then there is a crit chance increase. The one thing to know when evaluating crit chance in Avowed is that all ranged headshots are automatically crits. So all weapons which allow you to produce headshots on a regular level don't benefit from increase in crit chance, only in crit damage. For all weapons which can't easily create headshots, crit % increases are valuable, which in most cases means melee attackers will profit from perception while ranged attackers who have an easy time performing headshots do not. Now it's time to cover all the basic passive nodes which are responsible for enhancing your base weapon stats. A majority of your points you need to invest for optimal performance goes into these nodes. These are Brawn, 50% damage buff at rank 3 for two-handed weapons. Marksmanship, 50% damage buff at rank 3 for bows and guns. Finesse, 50% damage buff for one-handed weapons. Then there are a couple of conditional nodes. Piercing thrusts. It increases power attacks for daggers, swords and spears by 40%. Steady aim. Slows time by 75% at rank 3 for bows and guns while aiming. Sniper. Increases range damage versus unaware enemies by 40%. And Retribution, which allow one damage instance to be enhanced by 120% after taking damage. Then there are crit enhancing perks. These are Critical Strike, which increases crit chance by 20% at rank 3, and Devastating Criticals, which increases critical damage by 60% for melee attacks at rank 3. After that you have stun enhancing nodes, which are Stunning Blows, which increases stun by 50% while power attacking at max rank for hammers and maces, and Staggering Shot, which increases stun by 90% with bows and guns. Shields have Unbreakable, which reduces block cost by 60% at rank 3. Now that we know our passive numbers, we can compile all of these information into a priority list. We have three main stats which directly are multipliers for our DPS value. There is one point you have to consider when comparing stats. The thing with additively stacking damage bonuses is that the total relative damage change becomes smaller and smaller the more you already have of them. So when a mage, for example, who does not have any other damage bonuses, gets plus 30%, the final damage change will be 30% more damage. Simple as that. But if a fighter who already has a plus 50% damage bonus from other sources and does, for example, 150 damage per swing, brings it to a plus 80% bonus from increasing strength, you will see the damage numbers rise to 180, which is only a 20% increase. So there is a point when other stat increases that impact your damage, like crit or attack speed, will become more useful if they are not stacking as high, even if they might have lower numbers. The relative change from any multiplayer's boosted value is always the same relative increase your total damage will end up doing. So we have Might as our first multiplier, which doesn't require any conditions to work. Affect damage, but you already have at least a 50% bonus to it from passives. The next multiplier is Perception, which only non-headshotting builds can really benefit from. Your crit profile boosted from talents of 20% crit chance and 100% 110% crit damage for melee weapons. That equals an average damage multiplier of 22% more damage, or your damage times 1.22. If we increase that with 30% more crit chance from attribute points to a value of 50% crit chance, the crit multiplier would equal a 55% damage increase, or an 1.55 multiplier. A relative increase from an average damage boost from crits from 122% to 155% equals a 27% relative increase in total damage, which is more than the relative total damage change of 20% we get for melee weapons when considering the 50% damage base talent of each weapon, and even less if more damage buffs are present. That makes perception always have priority for melee weapons over might. Ranged weapons stay away from that. So let's talk about dexterity. If endurance in a theoretical scenario is not a concern and the action speed increase is applied to the complete animation, then that would be the best stat to invest in. A 34% increase to attack speed would be stronger than the two other stats. But it's not that simple. While attack speed increases, it shortens your window until you have to recover as well. So if you're out of endurance while the enemy is still alive after a full action sequence, the other two stats might perform better. And in addition to that, I don't have a way to actually test the full impact on animation speed for every animation. And if I ask my gut feeling, then I would say no, it doesn't seem to apply to everything equally. Reload times of arquebuses seem to be heavily affected by it. And the target circle aiming from your ranged weapon definitely does not, because that depends on your aim and not the animation. On the other hand, undercapping your endurance bar gives you, so to say, bonus endurance, and that could scale well with dexterity. And then on level 20 we have Flurry of Blows anyway, which gives you 1/3 uptime of maximum attack speed, making dexterity much less useful after hitting 20 and taking that talent. So for me, it feels safer to not prioritize dexterity outside of guns and two-handed weapon who regularly undercap their endurance bar with heavy attacks. That's up to discussion. What are your observations here, guys? Write in the comments please, so we can all learn from each other experiences. So it's time for the talents. There are a lot of tactical or utility nodes in the trees as well. Let's have a look. Armored Grace. It's too weak for its point coast. Skip it. Shield Bash. This node unlocks a special maneuver. When you wield a shield, press attack while blocking. This lets you make a quick swing with your shield. It causes low damage, but fully upgraded causes a small amount of stun and pushes the attacker back for a couple of meters. It's extremely quick and it's good follow-up when you want to go from blocking to attacking. It costs 15 essence and 40 stamina. It feels good to use and makes the shield even more defensive because you can quickly apply crowd control directly from blocking and then go over to attack the knocked back enemy. The entire action sadly costs essence and a lot of stamina, which quickly adds up and converts so much of your stamina resource to only knocking the enemy without doing any damage that it feels like you are fighting with a wet towel. If this wouldn't take away 1/3 of your stamina bar every 3 seconds, I would consider using that, but currently it costs too much stamina and talent points to really feel strong. So for me, it's a skip. Constant recovery lets you at max rank always recover to the last point where your HP was when you were hit the last time. If you are hit constantly, it creates a permanent HP recovery. The ranks also increase the rate at which you heal, so taking this at rank 3 is a must. All in all, this is a useful talent which can make you much more enduring. With all these healing you can get from food and potion, it's still not really that required, and points invested into doing more damage will probably make the game play smoother in the long run. It's not bad, but if you can handle the encounters without this, going for more damage is better. Toughness. This talent stacks additively with Constitution. It works exactly the same as the attribute. If you have a lot of equipment, bonuses and the talent points, you could consider taking this. Bleeding Cuts. Single target status effect talents are not good. It's bad. Skip it. Iron Fist. Works with finesse talent and works like a dual-wielded melee weapon. Ranks your fist up to a higher tier. A use case is when you come to a point where you don't want to spend upgrade materials on weapons yet, but enemies are too high rank. Then you can use this for a while until you want to spend your materials. A good weapon will be stronger. Build to Destroy. Minuscule mana regeneration when breaking barrels. As useless useless as it can get. Reflect. Perfect time a parry for reflecting a single projectile, preventing the damage. Use a mage shield for reflecting arrows instead. You would need to perfectly time every arrow, and mage shield works on projectiles that come from behind too. Not worth the hassle. Skip. Retribution. Increases your damage bonus for one attack. Good for strong single target attacks. As of now, sometimes the buff just vanishes after half a second, and sometimes the damage increase doesn't work. Good in theory, but buggy currently. Inspiring Triumph. Conditional allied party member res. It's not so unbelievably bad as you could imagine, but almost. Skip. Survivalist. Use it when you have enough materials saved up at the camp to create food, then respec. Parry. Use a timed block to completely nullify an attack. It costs no stamina. You need to be able to block to use it, so not working on dual wielding. Probably best with two-handed weapons, since shields are good enough with block without timing the blocks. 3 points investment is a lot though. There are some weapon effects that trigger when parrying, so you could probably create a build around that. I didn't feel that I had the points for that, but it's not necessarily bad if you have a good game feel when to use it. ArrowDeflection requires parry, same as reflect, too much effort to use it on every arrow. Use mage shield for that. Quick switching increases weapon switch time, reloads offhand weapon after 3 seconds. If you want to use multiple weapon sets like one melee and one ranged, splitting your talent points up so you switch between 2 different types of weapons is not effective, and then using more talent points to switch between them quicker doesn't make it better. A special use case is to use multiple sets of arquebuses, and when you have taken 2 shots or 1 shot and 1 finisher, which takes over 3 seconds, then you can switch to cut the reload speed down, but you need 2 upgraded arquebuses for that. Now that we got an overview about the passive abilities, let's go through the active skills. Ball Rush. This starter ability is an incredible tool for melee attackers. More than 1 point is not needed. For its quick activation time and its cheap and spammable nature, it does decent stun damage. It works as a gap closer, has a small radius where it can hit multiple targets that are standing close together, and most importantly, it interrupts attack chains of big creatures. Want your enemy to stop casting or mauling at you? Hit the button and you have 3 seconds of peace. You are still regenerating endurance when you perform this. Since you are already using that as a gap closer, you don't need to initiate the fight with heavy attacks. But don't forget your undercapping heavy swing as last move in the sequence. If you are a melee guy, take it. Tanglefoot. This is your other starting ability option. Like Bull Rush, it hits a small area, but most of the time it will only hit 1 enemy. It roots them for 8 seconds. Its upgrades are adding poison build-up and increasing its duration. It's more suited towards ranged attackers who want a bit of freedom and can keep the big guys a little bit away from you, and makes headshotting even easier. I think 1 point is enough. Bull Rush is better in my opinion, but as a ranged attacker you probably want to take this. BarbaricShout. The base version of this effect makes your attacks uninterruptible and doubles your stun application. These effects alone are very strong. Its first upgrade gives you a temporary shield equal to the amount of max HP and taunts the enemies. Rank 3 increases its duration. This talent with rank 2 is a real powerhouse. 1 button and the entire fight becomes more manageable. Nearby enemies will stop killing your companions. You will not be knocked out of your attacks. You become a stunning monster, and it scales so crazy with your HP that having this talent alone gives the Toughness talent, the Constitution attribute, and HP bonuses on your equipment a complete new dimension of usefulness. This talent and the shield spell from the mage list will set the difficulty from Path of the Damned to normal difficulty. Well, at least it feels like it. 2 ranks will give you better uptime on your shield, while 3 ranks will give you better uptime on the buffs. Shadowing Beyond. Another powerhouse. This talent doesn't like to cooperate with a blood magic talent. You'd need to power it with essence. Well, at least you have a use now for your 80 unused essence potions. Other than that, it's awesome. Well, at least for you. Your companions will get all the aggro when you use it. You become invisible. You can heal, chill, eat, drink, lick your wounds, and even rest your companions over and over without breaking invisibility. And then you enter stealth mode, hit an enemy with a sneak attack for massive damage, and find a new position. It's good stuff. Power Jump. This is more of a gimmick than a real action. It's so hyper-situational and even then has an annoyingly long cooldown. Aside from making funny action videos with your character jumping on the enemy's head, can't recommend this. Power Slide doesn't work with blood magic. Allows you to slide through multiple enemies. All are thrown to the ground. There is no cooldown on that, so aside from 20 essence per slide, you can perma-knock down dangerous enemies that try to hug you too much. 1 rank is enough for the knockdown and better controllable for use with a melee weapon. 2 ranks are better for a ranged weapon. And 3 ranks add a little bit of stun damage. Another great talent. Beer Ally. This talent will summon a beer at your location. After a couple of seconds, it just plops into existence in a way that you may ask yourself if the FX artist was on holiday when that effect was created. The beer then roars, probably out of frustration, and taunts all enemies around it. Its damage is nothing spectacular and it can't withstand a lot of damage, but it will give you and your companions complete freedom. The beer got all the aggro in the white area. It synergizes well with all abilities that decreases the damage that enemies can do, like stuns, crowd control or frost magic, or with companions' healing abilities. Another talent that is by no means required and doesn't really belong to any specific build, but it's strong and anyone can profit from it. If you have the points, which is very unlikely, take it. Into the Fray. It pulls multiple enemies into a pile. Its range is not so incredible that this ability is a must-have. They have to stand relatively close together in order to be able to pile them up, but it still can be utilized when used in conjunction with small area spells like Tanglefoot, Bull Rush, Wand attacks or Power Slide or Clear Out to great effect. Only take it if you have a synergistic build, but it can work really well. It by no means is required though. Clear Out, the final ability of the fighter tree. It lets you make a short spin, 1 to 3 times depending on the rank. If you want to make this worthwhile, you are almost required to combine this with Into the Fray. It's satisfying to use and creates a massive stun and knockback and good damage in all targets. Its cooldown is so unreasonably high that combined 6 talent points just to make 1 move every 30 seconds is just not worth it. This talent could be very good, but it isn't. It's a misdesigned capstone ability. Very, very sad. Flurry of Blows, our final ability. This monster gives you 10 seconds of increased stamina regen and maximum attack speed. Rank 2 adds a tiny bit of lifesteal, which is superficial, and rank 3 adds another 5 seconds to it. Rank 1 is a 1-point wonder, but its effect is so good that rank 3 could be worth it as well, if you got the points. This talent has an almost 35% uptime. Don't build into Dexterity if you take this talent. It already gives you maximum attack speed. Build crafting for fighter and rangers will mostly go this way. First, pick your poison when it comes to your weapon choice. Choose all the synergizing attributes and base amplifying talents and the 1 or 2 items that probably don't sound too counterintuitive. And then for your leftover talent points, go for all the utility or buffing talents that you like. That's it. Building done. If you like that game system overview, please consider subscribing. Wish you all the best and see you later.